Welcome to Charts Today Energy. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Friday, the 26th of October, comes to you from London. And we're seeing a sea of red across the energy mix this morning. Let's just take a look at the macro markets, the big things that are affecting us. We're seeing here the dollar actually looking strong still, bullish on the short term, upside potential of 1.5% on the short term chart, and looking bullish really on the other time frames. Remembering this is my long term weekly, daily, and 60-minute view. The euro sinking lower against the dollar, so we target here of 112, so that's having an impact as well. And looking at the yen, dollar is actually sinking a little bit lower here, the yen being a safe haven. Pound is sitting at 128, just nudging that 128 level, and we've got targets to 126. We've been talking about this 128 target for a while. We're there now, so 126.60 is the next target, and some very big scary targets should we get a failure on Brexit, which is really the fear that's been priced into the chart. Sterling falling lower against the euro this morning, downside target there of 111.40, and against the Swiss franc, we're seeing sterling lower as well. So the markets really just all down in Asia and Europe. The US actually recovered a bit yesterday, but it's this future is really bugging things at the moment. We're down just under 1% on the Nasdaq future, and that's affecting all the markets. We're seeing the FTSE down in London, the DAX down 1.3%. We're seeing quite a lot of driving forces here. Gold actually up at 1236, so we're seeing that move to gold turning bullish, and US 10-year yields on the Treasury yields in the US down at 3.09%. So we're seeing really the market starting to price in that the Fed won't raise rates as fast as expected with these turmoil that we're seeing in the markets. Looking at the energy mix, we start by looking at Brent crude. All this data coming off Thomson Reuters Icon. So here we've got my weekly, my 1% and my 0.5% chart. This is my long-term view. My daily charts here with correlations, and then my 60-minute chart. And then my 1-minute charts, my very short-term charts, which are just telling me really what should happen today. And we see with crude, we've actually had quite a recovery this morning. We steadily headed lower, and we're back to where we were. So we're seeing the prices really seesawing around here. We're hitting quite strong resistance, and we do have this downside target of 71.20 not yet activated, but 73.50 that is hanging over us. So crude, Brent crude, having been nudging $90 only weeks ago, is now looking at the low 70s potentially, and we had this target of 75, which was given and met. The next one is 72 if we take out the low that we saw earlier this month. Taking a look at WTI, much the same picture, of course. Here we have downside targets some 6 and 12% lower. We need to move to new lows to activate those, but quite scary targets there. And again, we're seeing a bit of recovery this morning, a bit of a relief there. Not much of a move in the scheme of things, but we're just gaining some strength on the short term. Correlation with the dollar is actually positive on the 60-minute chart, which is quite unusual. So we're just seeing that at the moment. Taking a look at US nat gas, sitting at $3.15, has actually fared fairly well in the crisis, and we're seeing here in terms of correlation to crude, it's weak, so there's not much correlation here. Nat gas is doing what it wants, and we've got downside targets here of 308, 304. So those are hanging over the price at the moment, but we're probably hitting some long-term resistance here as well. Looking at heating oil, down 0.3%. Very clear downside targets here on heating oil on the 1-minute chart and on the 60-minute chart. So we're seeing that's quite clear. Bob also has been sinking lower with downside targets that are clear and activated. So these products are still looking pretty bearish. Coal, we're seeing API2 sank pretty heavily yesterday, nudging the bottom. 95.60 the downside target. This is the ICE contract. Of course, if you're using Trayport into Updata, you'll have different targets on your screen, higher liquidity. So you'll have a better picture there, really. And those 1 minute targets are the key to watch. On Richards Bay, much the same. The liquidity there not quite as good. Looking at the emissions contract on ICE, we are actually pretty flat this morning. We fell away yesterday, but have recovered a little bit this morning. Just holding on, and emissions looking less bearish than other products. We do still have this 1818 target hanging over us, but upside targets now of 1945, 1960. So it's a pretty hard read at the moment, but emissions just holding on there. And we're looking at the correlations here with crude negative on that short-term chart. Looking to European gas, we've had a pretty tough week on gas. In fact, emissions just ticked up as we speak. MBP has fallen away quite heavily, and if you're looking at the daily chart, it's really rolling over. The fact that we are making a new multi-week lows back to levels that we saw in August is bearish, and it is looking somewhat like a head and shoulders here on MBP. That's showing up in the lagging line, highly correlated with crude oil, of course. So if we see a fall away in crude, then we shouldn't be surprised to see it in MBP as well. The downside targets that were all given on these charts were met, so quite key there. And if we look at the 1 minute targets on MBP, we've got still two targets in train and activated: 65.10 and 62.40. So that's 3% and 7% downside potentially on MBP. Front month. Looking at TTF, much the same picture, of course, and in fact, again, rolling over, making multi-month lows, and we're seeing these pretty clear downside targets. We do have a counter trend target this morning of 25.15, but 24.40 is really the targets that were given, and they're not being quite met yet, but we've got another target now, 23.95, generated yesterday, and another one at 23.75 generated this morning. With all these thrust moves down are generating new price targets to the downside. Again, on your Trayport data, might be slightly different. Keep an eye on that. Of course, German gas is lower, and we're seeing downside potential just under 1% there. Italian gas just still falling like a stone, 2% further downside. Looking to power markets, German power actually is down 0.75% this morning. Looking straight to the short-term chart, we see here we've got downside targets 48.60, 49.60, 54.40. So the power price really just falling away there this morning. So looking to go lower still. And if we look at other products, of course, we've got French power with downside targets. Nordic power just bucking the trend a little bit this morning, building a little bit of a base here on this 1 minute shorter term chart, and we do have some upside targets to play for. 39.75 not yet activated, but 39.25 is. 43.10 has been there actually since the 11th of October. So we do have downside targets, neither of which are activated. So at the moment, Nordic power's a little bit of a bright spot. Looking at UK power, we see also just touching the bottom here. We've got downside targets there as well, 63, 64, and 59.40. So quite interesting there. And pretty well across the board, we're seeing prices sinking. We've got Italian power lower. All being dominated, of course, by German power. Maybe another bright spot actually is Polish power, where we do have some upside targets to the upside. This is the exchange contract. Again, if you're running this data on your Trayport screen, you'll have better data and slightly different targets. That's it for today. Hang in there. It's going to be a tough day to trade with everything that's going on. Until next week, happy charting. See you then.